welcome to this week's Maternity and Midwifery Hour. My name's Sue Macdonald and I'm the curator for the Maternity and Midwifery Hour and the Maternity and Midwifery Festivals, and it's my pleasure to be chairing this evening's edition. We are now Series 16 and Session 9, and we've got two lovely speakers. We have Inge Nickell, I'm going to do it wrong, Nickell, correct, and Stephanie Kinder, who are with us this evening. And because we do always do this, we're going to ask them to share a moment of the week. So perhaps if I could ask Inge to share her moment.
Yeah, and I sort of had a real thought about this, and it's only Wednesday. And I actually felt like, I feel like I've had quite an amazing week already because it's Baby Communication Week and some wonderful things are happening. But in true honesty, the moment of my week was a call from my daughter yesterday, who is in Alaska at the moment. So, yes, so that was really wonderful.
Oh, wonderful. How's the weather in Alaska?
It's not icy, but it's cold.
Oh, gosh.
Where
That's
she
quite
is.
welcome just now, I think. Oh, that's lovely. That's a good moment to share.
Yeah.
Stephanie, do you have a good moment to compete with Inge?
Yeah, mine is that I've been on my allotment this week quite a lot, and I've got to the point in the year where I get to just pick all the lovely things I've been growing. So me and my children have been eating lots of raspberries and peas yesterday. So that was my moment of the week so far.
Yummy. Now you're making my mouth water, Stephanie. Thank you for that. And a very healthy activity from the planting of things. You're obviously a bit more ahead than I am because we're still planting a few things. Our raspberries aren't so good, but yours, I'm my mouth's watering at the thought of it. So thank you
They
for
don't
sharing.
last long though, that's the only thing.
No, never very long, never very long. Okay, well, we're going to let our guests have a minute's quiet before they start presenting, and I just need to say a big welcome to those of you who are new to the Maternity Midwifery Hour and those of you who are old friends who come every week. Welcome to one and all. And I just need to tell people who are new where we came from and when we started, and that was in the first COVID lockdown in the UK in March 2020. Can't believe it's 5 years. Where we started because we couldn't have festivals, we couldn't have conferences or study days. And we really felt it was very important, the midwives, student midwives, maternity care support workers, all the people working in maternity services, because that's our love, the maternity services. And they needed some connection and something weekly just to get some information. And initially, we did a lot around COVID and the changes in the services and the changes in education for students, because people needed to know what was going on in the whole service, and that was really good and really interesting. Some amazing things went on. It was a difficult time, scary time, and those of you who were around somewhere in the service will remember that. But of course, now we're not talking so much about COVID. We're just talking about things that are really interesting, things that are very contemporary that are happening within the maternity services at the moment. And I need to tell you, everything's recorded by them, and everything the Maternity and Midwifery Forum do is recorded. So if you should have a power cut, don't panic. You'll be able to catch up later. And that goes for everything that we do. So any of the festivals, if you go to a festival, you get the whole package afterwards to dip into at your leisure. And this is because Matflix look after everything for us, all the recordings. And you can subscribe to Matflix, but if you're lucky and you have a fantastic university or trust that know about it, you can actually have a free access, because if they subscribe, you can get that free access. Health warning, this is week 3 I'm saying this. Do have a go at looking at some of the material, especially if you're doing a project, you're doing a dissertation or an assignment for college or university. Really useful source of very up-to-date, good information in a very accessible way. I always like to hear people talk. When researchers talk about their research, it all comes alive. When someone in practice has done something exciting in practice, when they're talking about it, you can see the passion, and it all makes good sense. A really useful resource. But the health warning is, once you go into that Netflix and you start listening and having a look around, it's very addictive, and suddenly 2 hours has gone by. So that's just your health warning for that. But do share. So tonight is going to be really interesting, and you might want to share with your colleagues and your fellow students or your fellow midwives, and do that, because we're not precious about keeping knowledge. We want to share it and really get it out there to improve practice and improve knowledge for care for mums and babies and families. So do share. And I'm going to do just a quick reminder, because I think the news this week has been quite tricky and difficult for all of us, I think, to hear. And I think all I need to say is look after yourselves, because it's a difficult time and it's never easy in the health service, because it's a stressful place to work at the best of times. And when there's sort of media focus, it can be really hard. So look after yourselves and look after each other as well. Okay, I'm off my soapbox now. Now I'm going on to a little bit of news. Now, birthday honours came out last week and I was a little bit late with it, but now I'm going to say congratulations, first of all, to Professor Calvin Morley, who's been on the Maternity Hour. He's Chair of Diversity and Social Justice in Nursing, and he was awarded an MBE in the King's Birthday Honours list for outstanding contributions to nursing, social justice and academia. So that was great. Our own Professor Mary Steen got an OBE for outstanding services to midwifery, maternal and familial health research. And Professor Jane Cummings, former England CNO, has been made a Dame. Not a huge list of people. Now, if you know of anyone that I've missed, please let us know, because it's really difficult. I go through the pages and pages of awards and looking for maternity or looking for midwifery, and I can miss it. So if I did, let me know. And there's a special prize for if you can find someone I've forgotten or haven't seen. And of course, maternity services are in the news, as I was saying just a minute ago, and Wes Streeting has announced a national rapid review investigation. And for more information, have a look at this week's forum newsletter, which will be out on Thursday, because Neil Stewart, our impresario par excellence, will be presenting and trying to explain what's going to be going on and what its implications for midwifery and for women and families and babies. But it's basically, as far as we can see at the moment, a 10 trust investigation to look at improvements. It's sort of like the Darcy Star review that was done a few years back. The report's going to be done by December 2025, which is very fast for a review and a report. There's involvement with families, of course, special focus on inequalities, and especially for Black and brown families, where there's still inequalities that we need to address. And this is about maternity and neonatal units together. So it's quite a tricky investigation, and more information will come out over the coming few days. So I'm almost early to start, because I'm really keen now to get on with the next bit of the hour, which is just to say it's Baby Communication Week, as Inge said. And it's a really important time, because you kind of think, well, babies just cry, don't they? They don't do very much except cry. We know differently, though. We're going to explore the midwife's role in facilitating early connections between the baby and its carer, usually the mother or the father, family, whatever, and how this baby communicates with the world and the carers, and how we can help parents understand better how their babies speak to them, and also the amazing abilities the babies have. And I can remember the first time I was reading Berry Brazelton's work and seeing some of the little videos that he put out, which were stunning, absolutely stunning, because at one point we were all told babies were just little like blank canvases that were just there. And that really gave us a completely different picture. So I'm going to start by introducing lovely Inge Nickell, who's a director of the Brazelton Centre UK and a specialist in infant mental health. She's got a particular focus on the early relationship between parents and their newborns, and her background includes being a registered nurse and health visitor. She holds loads and loads of qualifications, including completing the touch points model, which I'm hoping she might mention. And she's developed an infant mental health service for families with children 0 to 5 years in her local area, and provided perinatal mental health training to professionals throughout the country. And in 2019, she established a newborn behavioural observation centre in Denmark. She's also a master trainer. I feel sure she's going to share what that's all about as well. So welcome to Inge. The screen is now yours, and thank you so much for coming this evening to speak to us.
Thank you so much, Sue. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you so much for inviting us here today. And I'm going to just kind of talk a little bit about the Brazelton approach and why it's important to really focus on that really early period of time. And then hopefully Stephanie will talk a little bit about the implementation and how it's used by midwives. So just to kind of set the scene, I want to really emphasize the importance of the first 1001 days, which again is something that we hear a lot about, and that's because it's what we call age of opportunity. We know that by age 2, a child's brain is about 80 to 90% the size of an adult brain. So there's enormous growth in that 1001 days. And during that time, millions of neural connections are formed, each influenced by the child's environment. But what's actually needed is these positive nurturing experiences which set the stage for the development for all kinds of abilities, but particularly development of cognitive abilities, emotional regulation, and learning capacity. So this is a time where foundations are laid for lifelong emotional, social, and physical well-being. And this period of time, the impact of it really does have lasting benefit for individuals, families, and society. So it's really something that we want to focus on. So at the Brazelton Centre, we narrow it down to even further. We narrow it down to the first 100 days. So the approaches that we deliver training in are delivered in the first 3 months of the baby's life. That is corrected age, though. And the reason for focusing on that period is because we know that it's a period of great vulnerability for the baby, for the parents, and the baby's family system. There are so many transitions going on. The baby needs to transition to an outside world. The parents has to transition to a new role and looking after a baby. But it's also what Professor Kevin Newton calls a period of great opportunity for clinicians. And I just want to share his quote. He says, "For clinicians who work with children and families, the newborn period and the first months of life may well be the teachable moment per excellence, because it is a major transition period in the life of the child, in the life of the parent, and indeed in the life of the whole family." So I kind of just want to give a little bit of reasoning also. I mean, Dr. Brazelton, when he developed the first, the Neonatal Behaviour Assessment Scale, which was quite a long time ago now, in 1973, and he spent many years developing that. He already knew how important this time was, and he knew how amazing newborn babies were. This is now backed up, and this interview here with Dr. Bruce Perry, who's a psychiatrist and neuroscientist, is being interviewed here by Oprah Winfrey, and I'm not going to play it, but it is available on YouTube. So Dr. Perry has studied, particularly for decades, the impact of trauma on the baby's brain. And what the longitudinal research has actually shown now is that the most crucial period of time for an infant is the first 2 months of life. So the first 2 months of life, if they're good enough, then no matter what happens later on in their life, they seem to manage it better. Whereas a baby that has two not good time in the first couple of months, no matter how good that life is, after the 2 months, they will always do worse than the baby that had 2 good months. So this really emphasized the importance of us really intervening early and supporting that early relationship. So perfect for midwives. See every single baby that comes into this world, so there is no more a better time to really support that relationship. The 2 graphs here I think are really important as well, because it just shows the adaptability of the baby's brain. We can see that it's so adaptable, and there's a huge ability to change in response to their experience in the first few months, and then actually making a change, how difficult that is, the amount of effort change takes as that baby gets older. And the little graph in the left-hand side just shows the costs if we don't support that really early relationship and get it right for these babies. So our focus at the Brazelton Centre is the relationships. So the focus is to support and strengthen the parent-infant relationship from birth, and particularly through the lens of the baby's contribution to that relationship. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. So the Brazelton approach is about believing babies are active participants in the world and their relationships. We see a baby's behaviour as their communication, the expression of who they are as a person and their needs. Understanding the meaning of different behaviours are really important, and the individual ones. And the approach is always to be open, curious observer of babies and responding to what they're telling us. So the Brazelton approach is not really giving sort of advice. If a parent come and say, I'm really worried about their crying, we don't start giving advice on crying. We actually listen to the parents, and then we listen to the baby by saying, okay, let's have a look at your baby together and see what they're telling us. And then we explore what that baby might be trying to tell us, what it is that might be a bit difficult for them, what they need to change, or how they need to be co-regulated. And again, I need to just share this little quote by Dr. Brazelton, who says, a baby's behavior is his language, and you can always trust that language. And that's why if you're ever in doubt about what is happening somewhere, just go and have a look at that baby, and also never forget to listen to the parents, because they do know their babies. So why is behavior so important? So understanding a baby's behavior enables us to see and understand their world, the things they like and the things they need support with. So it's strengths-based, but we're also very much observing any sensitivities, difficulties, or what they're working really hard on. So at the Brazelton Centre UK, we have training programs which help practitioners understand baby behaviour and gain the knowledge, skills and confidence to share baby with his or her parents. So here you can see the NBAS and the NBO. The NBAS, the Neonatal Behavioural Assessment Scale, was developed by Dr. Brazelton in 1973, and it is today still the most comprehensive neurobehavioural assessment available for newborn babies. And it's mostly used in research and clinical settings. The NBO, the Newborn Behaviour Observation, was developed by Professor Kevin Newton, a psychologist, and it's a relationship building tool which is designed to help the practitioner and parent observe the baby's unique behaviours. And it's suitable to be used across any setting. It can be used by anyone who works with babies and with all babies, no matter what, and it's used all over the world. So interestingly, Sue, as you were saying, if we think back, and actually my background is a health visitor, and I always had parents asking me, can he see, can they hear, what can they do? They don't really do anything. And that was the kind of view for many years. And sadly, I think it's still here. And the work that Dr. Brazelton and many of his colleagues did back in the 60s, 70s, even 50s, actually showed us that babies are indeed incredibly competent, and they learn through all their senses. They're organized, so they have 6 different behavioral states that they move in and out of. They're social. We all know when you hold that baby that they are little connectors from the moment they get into the world. But as they got their connectors out, it's really important there's somebody else who's got their connectors out, because there needs to be a transition there. And if they don't have that connection, they soon start sort of going down. We know that every single baby is individual, and I'm sure Stephanie will agree with me that when you do the MBOS or the MBO, it's just incredible. I have done 1,000. I've never seen 2 babies that are the same. And that's taught me to always be open when I go and see a family and a baby. I don't know this baby till I have really observed them and listened to them, and kind of also listened to the parents. So a little brief zoom in on the MBO. We always say all behavior has a meaning. So there's no such thing as a random behavior. If a baby turns their head away, it's probably because they're taking a little break. If they're having any color changes or they start changing states, it all means something. Putting a hand up, whatever it is. Little babies cross their legs in order to contain themselves sometimes. They have so many ways of communicating. But what we actually look at is a lot of the things that most parents worry about. We look at sleep. So we look at habituation, the particular capacity of a baby to protect their sleep from the kind of disturbing environment. We look at their behavioral state, motor tone, activity level, and reflexes, which shows us how they're adapting, what are their movements like, how do they manage handling. We look at self-regulation because babies do have capacity to self-regulate, but the important thing here is to recognize when they need co-regulation, because they do. They can't just self-regulate, they need us. We look at the baby's response to stress. Stress for a baby can be waiting for a feed, not being changed, being understimulated, being overstimulated, being cold, too warm, having a bright light in their face, having a noise that they can't shut out. It can be all sorts of different things, but the babies will tell us if there's something that's uncomfortable or difficult for them. And then, of course, we look at the interactive social capacities that the babies have, and they are amazing. They really are just so capable. So what we are kind of talking about is looking at the infant as a catalyst. So this might sound a little bit crazy, but we do strongly believe from all the observations and interactions we've had with babies that they're very capable of telling us exactly what they need from their caregivers. But you need to stop, you have to watch, you have to listen, you have to wonder, and then respond to what it is that that baby is telling us. If we do, we're more likely perhaps not to get it quite right. So the aim of the MBO is really to capture what the infant is bringing to the relationship. And some babies are really easy to read and some are more challenging to read. And that is something that we need to accept as well. But all the parents can do with support in recognizing that. So the impact of using the MBO for parents and practitioners, we know that for practitioners, it deepens their attunement and presence. It gives an opportunity to model reflective capacity for parents. It strengthens the practitioner-parent relationship, and it also supports developmentally sensitive and individualized care. For parents, we often see them begin to see their baby as a little person. They better appreciate their baby's unique competencies and vulnerabilities, and also learn to understand and respond to their baby in a way that meets the baby's unique developmental needs. So I'm sorry for whizzing through that so fast. I'm not even sure how I'm doing. But again, I just want to finish with this really, really important quote. And we have to remember that Dr. Brazelton was writing all of this in the 70s, 60s. It's a long time ago. This knowledge is not new. It's been around for a very long time. And he always had this quote saying, when we strengthen families, we ultimately strengthen the community. We should invest in babies. There's no doubt about it. It will have long-lasting benefits for absolutely everyone. So thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Inge. I think, I mean, I met Barry Brazelton one time, and I just thought he was such a warm person. You'd want him to be looking at your baby and telling you all about your baby. That's fantastic. So thank you for that. And now, if you have any questions for Inge, just put them in the chat box, and Paul will send them through to me from 1:45. Okay, so next we have the wonderful Stephanie Kinder. She's a specialist midwife working at North Bristol Trust, supporting women and families to access safe and equitable maternity care where they're facing a range of adversities. She's trained to offer the neonatal behavioural observations and is a Brazelton champion, helping to promote the Brazelton approach and the voice of the baby. I love that. The voice of the baby in maternity services in Bristol and beyond, I think, Stephanie. So welcome to this evening. Thank you so much for coming. The screen is now yours. Hopefully all being well, allowing any gremlins in the system.
There we go. Can you hear me?
Perfect.
Great, cool. Yeah, so thank you so much for inviting me to be here. It's a real honour, and thank you to Inge for her brilliant presentation about the Brazelton approach and sort of laying the foundations for my presentation about the midwife's role in facilitating those early connections. I just wanted to mention that an episode a couple of weeks ago by Stephanie Michaelides and Professor Helen Ball called How Babies Sleep. I think that these two episodes will kind of link up really beautifully. So if you didn't listen or watch that one, then I'd really recommend kind of going back and then catching up on that one. And hopefully that I can build on some of what was said in that presentation. So starting to think about what the midwife's role is within facilitating early connections. So we know that midwives have a really clear role in public health, health promotion, health protection, and we're required to have a really good understanding and knowledge of health and social inequalities, as well as the impact of social determinants of health on public health and well-being. We must also promote and support parent and newborn mental health, positive attachment, relationship building, and the transition to parenthood and early child development as well. And we're required to have knowledge and understanding of psychological, behavioural, and cognitive factors impacting on those. And all of that comes directly from the standards of proficiency for midwives from the NMC. So this is all really, really within our remit. And as Inge has said, we know there's a wealth of evidence now about the kind of critical window of opportunity from conception up to 2 years old. And of course, us in maternity services are, we're offering a lot of our care within that window. And we know that there's even more evidence now, as Inge said, about the first 2 months holding really special significance, a time of both greatest vulnerability for the baby, but almost also an opportunity for clinicians. So that includes us midwives. So we're the professional, seeing the most of the babies at that age. And so as midwives, we've got the privilege of offering universal services to all of our families who choose to access our care. And obviously, we're not only offering universal care, but we're screening families for potential challenges in the parent-infant relationship, along with all the other things that we're screening for. So we're also able to offer referrals to more specialist services, offering interventions in this space. and the referral pathways can vary locally. So those services can be within perinatal mental health services or sometimes within CAMS as well. And just wanted to say, when I first did the MBO training, I can remember really clearly quoting someone else saying that once you've kind of learned the Brazelton approach, you can sort of never unlearn it. And it's really true. It's so much more than just the interactive tool. It's kind of a whole different way of being with a family. So when we're thinking about what we can do to help to support early parent relationships, I think it's really important to think about the relationships in general, the types of relationships that we try to build as midwives and health professionals. We all know that in order to get the most out of our therapeutic relationship, we want the families that we're caring for to feel safe and heard, and that they can trust us. And that's the type of relationship that we're trying to promote between babies and their carers. So when we're modeling those relationship building skills, the families can really feel the benefit of feeling nurtured and valued and listened to. And we need to be approaching kind of all those interactions with a starting point of kind of not knowing, a bit like Inge was just saying, being open to whatever the woman wants to tell us about, what's important to them right now, and not sort of prescribing the agenda for the interaction. And I think that kind of lays a really good foundation for opportunities to support the early parent-infant connection. So what can we do as midwives? So obviously we've got the continuum of our care antenatally at birth and then into the postnatal period. So antenatally, when we're having conversations with families and delivering antenatal education, we can be encouraging families to imagine their baby, visualize what they might look like, wondering what life is like for their baby. Parents might like to spend time touching their bump or observing their baby's movements, and we can start sowing the seeds about baby's movements being a way of their baby to communicate with them and tell them what's going on in their world, as well as obviously being a really important kind of clinical indicator for baby's physical well-being. One exercise that I like to use when I'm delivering antenatal education as a bit of an icebreaker is asking the kind of participants to introduce their baby to the group. So sharing what they already know about their baby, what their baby likes, and what they already know is a really nice exercise. And Brazelton have this really nice poster that you can put up in your clinical areas to support sort of sharing that information with families. And then moving into when we're caring for women and birthing people in the intrapartum period. So kind of building on what Stephanie was saying in her presentation a few weeks ago, it's really important that the midwife caring for the family is observing for those kind of clinical signs of normal transition for babies to extrauterine life. So we need to be trying to kind of handle the baby minimally, trying not to disturb and disrupt that kind of mother-baby dyad, facilitating early and safe, effective skin-to-skin, supporting early feeds offered by a parent. And it is, it could just be as much as sort of sitting quietly and observing and helping parents to recognise some of those early feeding cues. And then as midwives, we're very familiar with the principles of ATTAIN, so avoiding unexpected admissions to our neonatal units. And there's lots of reasons why we want to avoid babies being admitted to neonatal units, but we know one of the really important ones is the impact that it can have on the parent-infant relationship. So kind of prioritising that. And then moving into the kind of postnatal period, whether we're caring for our families on our postnatal wards or in the community. There's so many opportunities that we have to support those early connections between caregivers and their babies. So of course, we've got infant feeding support that we're offering families. We need to be really mindful of the baby's behaviour and what the baby's trying to tell us. So if we're thinking about the 6 behaviour states that Inge was saying about, so I've just got them here. So if if the baby is in state 6, so is crying and quite distressed, then that, you know, that baby is telling us that, you know, they're not telling me I want to feed right now. They're saying, you know, I need some support right now. Scroll down a bit. So it's really important for practitioners to be really mindful of how we're sort of stimulating babies and communicating with and handling babies, sort of modelling that reflexive capacity for parents to see. And then all of that translates also into thinking about our systematic examinations of the newborn, so our baby checks and our NIPE examinations. We need to be really mindful of how we're handling the baby, what the baby is trying to communicate to us, and responding accordingly. So kind of we're advocating for parents to be offering empathetic, responsive and sensitive care. So we need to be modelling that behaviour in our care too. So if the baby is telling us, you know, I'm finding this really difficult to cope with right now, unless it's a really urgent task that we're providing, you know, we need to be thinking about what reasonable adjustments can we make for that baby? How can we support that baby to be able to co-regulate themselves a little better and transition back down to kind of a lower behavioural state? So does the baby like to suck? Does the baby respond well to sort of physical containment or being returned to the midline? Can we keep the baby warmer or less exposed? So by being mindful of all of those things when we're caring for babies, we're helping parents to attune to their baby's needs as well. So overall, it makes the task less stressful for the baby, but also it might really help the response that the baby gets in the future from their caregivers. I think something that's really key, as Inge said as well, is just taking the time to sort of slow down and watch and observe babies and wonder what's going on in their little worlds. You know, for us, we might be handling the dozenth baby of the day, so it, you know, can feel quite routine and our minds might wander a little bit, but you know, for this family, you kind of handling their baby is a really big deal, and their baby is totally unique, and you know, trying not to view it as kind of a clinical observation, but as an opportunity to show a little window into the baby's world, and by helping to display the baby's incredible capacity to communicate, we can help sort of attune parents to their babies at the same time. And then thinking about supporting parents in their transition to parenthood, and helping them sort of reflect on their relationship with their baby. So the Department of Health and Social Care have come up with this practitioner's guide to conversations around parent-infant relationships. And for us midwives, I think the key is firstly kind of normalizing these conversations, conveying that it's, you know, it's a really important topic and it's worthy of conversation, and that we're talking to all families about it. It's not that we've identified a problem and that's why we need to discuss it with them. And then also trying to take a really strength-based approach. So, you know, what's going well, what does the baby enjoy and like, but also identifying those areas, those kind of vulnerabilities, and where the baby might need some support and how the parents can offer that. And then often these conversations kind of are happening in the context of responsive infant feeding, which, you know, of course is really, really important, but it's also important to recognise significance of you know, of the relationship for the baby's whole world, not just how they're fed. And sometimes it's a big adjustment for parents, shifting from having a baby that they imagined to the baby that, you know, they have in front of them. And this can be really challenging if there's, you know, some incongruence there, and, you know, it's not quite as they expect. So kind of linking back to Professor Helen Ball's thoughts a few weeks ago about sort of our cultural expectations of babies' behaviours and capabilities, the notion of kind of good babies and this sort of sentiment that we can influence the behaviour of a baby and the nature of babies. But the Brazelton approach kind of really flips that on its head and encourages us to see the sort of amazing uniqueness of all babies and what capacity they have, kind of what they bring to the table and what they bring to the relationship, how they're able to socialise and communicate with us right from birth. And it gives practitioners and parents a really good and grounding of, you know, what actually is sort of neurologically typical behaviour of newborn infants, and, you know, what that behaviour means. One of my most memorable MBOs was with a woman who was experiencing quite significant perinatal mental health illness, and she had quite a poorly baby on the ward with an infection, and she was finding it very sort of tricky to cope on the wards. And at the start of our interaction, she described her baby to me as needy and clingy. But sort of throughout the MBO, we reframed some of those behaviours she was identifying as problems, as actually areas that she was able to support her baby with, and you know, by offering that emotional warmth and close contact, she was able to support her baby, and it left her feeling, you know, that there was nothing wrong with her baby, and actually what an amazing gift that she was giving to her baby by responding to her baby so well. It left her feeling really empowered and confident. And then thinking now more a little bit about babies whose relationship with their carers might be a little bit more vulnerable for a number of reasons. So in maternity, we are providing care for lots of babies that are clinically vulnerable. So they could be on our wards or on transitional care wards. So it could be babies with infection or small babies experiencing withdrawal. So we know that these babies' nervous systems may be either a little less mature, or they might be facing kind of other factors that are impacting on their sort of neurobehaviour and stimulation thresholds. It might be that they're very sleepy and difficult to wake, or very fractious and difficult to soothe. But in my experience, kind of explaining to parents, you know, why their baby might be having those challenges and finding things difficult. For example, a baby being particularly sensitive when they're going through withdrawal can really help to understand what life is like for their baby and kind of hold their baby in mind a little better. And it offers them the opportunity to kind of learn how to safely support their babies with those challenges that they're facing. And then, of course, we've got the babies who are too unwell to be cared for on our maternity wards. So they're going to be facing some of those clinical challenges that we mentioned, but also getting to spend less time with their caregivers. It might be that they're in an incubator or having respiratory support. So that can be really challenging for parents to feel like they're getting to know their baby. So as midwives, we need to be making sure that we're communicating well with our neonatal colleagues, ensuring that we're doing everything we can to support that early parent-infant relationship. So, you know, getting parents down to NICU as soon as they can, and offering some flexibility in our maternity care in hospital and the community to sort of maximise the time that they're able to spend together with their babies. And then, aside from those sort of clinical vulnerabilities that I've mentioned, we also know that lots of parent-infant relationships face challenges due to other vulnerabilities, and these can be kind of coexisting. And we know that kind of adversities, they build up in that layering effect of adversities to have some really big impacts sometimes. So we could be thinking about parental mental health illness, a parent's own adverse childhood experiences, social isolation, lone parents, that type of thing. So by having, you know, a good knowledge and understanding of how these impact on babies' long-term physical and emotional and cognitive outcomes, we can start to think about how we can promote protective factors such as positive parenting. And it's really important, you know, to acknowledge the challenges that these babies face, but at the same time, it's really important to acknowledge that, you know, all hope is not lost. Evidence shows that protective factors mean that children can go on to thrive, even when they're facing increased vulnerabilities and experiencing adversity, and especially when offering early intervention to kind of ameliorate the impact of those risk factors. So that kind of goes back to a bit what Inge was saying in her presentations about that kind of early investment in babies, you know, is really cost effective for everyone, really. Not kind of the financial cost, but the social cost as well. And that kind of principle is really laid out in Public Health England's report, No Child Left Behind. And then, so where does MBO sort of fit in within my personal practice? So I offer MBOs as a targeted intervention to families facing adversity. So applying the principles of universal proportionalism to try and reduce the inequalities that those families are facing. I carried out a small quality improvement project, and the service user feedback was really positive. So I've kind of incorporated that into part of my role now. And I should say a really big thank you to everyone at the Brazelton Centre for all their support with that. They've been amazing. And yeah, just to end, to say that MBOs offer a fantastic opportunity for midwives and other practitioners and professionals to gain knowledge, skills and confidence in babies' behaviour, and offer a tool to help share with the families that we're caring for.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Stephanie, and thank you, Inge. Also, I'm almost wordless for a minute. Because that's very, I thought the story, Stephanie, you were giving about the mum who was having mental health issues and how you helped her to kind of communicate her and her baby together was really such a fantastic illustration of what can be achieved. Really helpful to kind of think about how you can use it in your day-to-day practice. So thank you for sharing that. Just to the audience now, if you have any questions for Inge or Stephanie, please send them in. I mean, I was sort of having a thought of this first 2 months being so critical, which you both focused on, which we know from the work is really important. And I guess what do you do if you think that 2 months is going to not be possible to get for example, if the baby is unwell or the mum's unwell, how can we work to really wrap up the mother and baby together so that they can get that 2 months? Because I'd be fretting about if I was the mum, if I was separated from my baby even for a few days, I'd be thinking, oh, I'm 2 or 3 days short of the 2 months I need. How can we deal with that? And maybe I'll ask Inge that because she started.
Yeah. And I have to sort of be upfront and say I'm not a neuroscientist, but from my knowledge, it's about a baby having good enough experiences. So in those situations where a mother and baby may go to a mother and baby unit, or a baby goes into a neonatal intensive care unit, what's important is that the people, the practitioners, the professionals who care for that baby give them a positive experience and are mindful of reading their cues and supporting that neurobehavior, your behavioral developments. So it's you know, in those situations where a parent may not be available, hopefully there are others who will provide that care that will give a good start for that baby. So it's not just the parents' responsibility. We as professionals have a responsibility of supporting that early relationship as well. And like Stephanie said, what we do and how we behave are very much observed by parents. So practicing in a sensitive you know, way is really beneficial and helpful for parents.
Fabulous. Stephanie, did you want to add anything to?
Yeah, the only thing I was going to add is kind to sort of, you know, reassure parents that babies don't need perfection. They don't, you know, they don't need us to always get it right every time, and that actually there's a lot of value in that kind of that sort of rupture and repair of babies, you know, us maybe not quite getting it quite right, but actually that sort of keep trying, and that, you know, we didn't quite get it right that time, but let's try again and see if we can get it right next time. So just trying to sort of reassure parents that it's, yeah, babies don't need perfection. Is really important. So if there is a bit of disruption in those first, you know, early days and weeks, you know, that, you know, it's not that all hope is not lost. You know, there's so many opportunities to kind of ameliorate those sort of disruptions.
And that's really helpful, because the thing that was going through my mind is, you probably remember years back, it was the bonding issue, and there was a sort of almost an illusion that if the parents or the mum didn't get together with the baby immediately and have this bonding experience, and if they didn't like the baby even, or the baby didn't appear to like them, it was going to be a big problem. So I mean, that it's the same sort of thing in a way, that each, and I think you've both put about the individual baby being so unique to that mother and pet and the parents, and the important thing is they're together and they're kind of learning about each other. So thank you for that. It was lovely. And the other thing I was sort of thinking, and I like actually I love the introduction antenatal. You know, that Stephanie, you described of the getting parents to share during an antenatal class, particularly what they thought their babies would like and what their babies were actually like. Does
Yeah,
that work out, do you
it
think?
does, yeah. I think at first they kind of look at me a bit strange and think, "Oh, what are you talking about?" But then, you know, if we start thinking about, you know, does your baby respond to a particular song that you play, or, you know,
Yeah.
when your partner talks to your bump, and actually kind of once they start talking, they realize that they already know so much about their babies, um, and it's just that kind of, you know, that holding their baby in mind and spending time thinking about their baby and talking about their baby and wondering about their baby is really good for them and really good for their baby, and you know, flooding their brain with oxytocin and doing all those
Oh,
wonderful things.
the love hormone.
Yeah, that you know, they can be doing that from, you know, from whenever they feel comfortable to do it. So I think, yeah, at first they do look at me a bit strange, but they usually really enjoy it.
Yeah. We just need to get more mums to antenatal, and parents actually do auntie classes. Now we've got a comment from Susan Polby. Hi, Susan. And she says, yes, I agree with Inge. Most mothers with mental health problems now have perinatal care in the community or on a mother and baby unit, excuse me, where the mother and baby are together and clinicians support mothers and babies getting to know one another. Thank you for that. That's really good, Susan. And then Juliet Samuel. Hi, Juliet. Juliet says, is it that babies have within themselves to adapt to the break with the continuity of mother and baby experience early on? That's an interesting question. Thoughts, Stephanie?
Can you repeat it for me? Sorry, there.
Is it that the babies have it within themselves to adapt to the break within the continuity of mother and baby experience early on?
Yeah, I mean, babies, you know, babies are incredibly resilient. We know that they are very kind of adaptable, and kind of, as Inga said, kind of it's more about that they are receiving that responsive care, that sensitive care, and that, you know, someone is holding them in mind,
Mm.
in those early days, you know, before they're able to sort of cognitively understand kind of who their parents are, if that makes sense.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, it's fascinating things really to think about. I think the separation has got people thinking, because Susan's come back. As Stephanie described, we should not be aiming at perfection, just good enough. Well, I think actually to the baby, the mother is more than good enough. The mother is perfection. They don't see us as, you know, in that way. Aiming at perfection brings its own problems. Aim for good enough. Well, we can aim for that. That's really good. Thank you. And I had and the window into the baby's world. I like that phrase because that was really a very, very good way of describing to parents about what they're trying to see in for their baby. And this teachable moment. The kind of that felt a bit scary at one point to me. If you missed it, the teachable moment. I don't know.
What for us as practitioners or as
Yes, I think so.
but
Yeah.
I think it's, you know, when we're doing MBOs, you know, it's one moment in time. It's one sort of conversation that you would have with anyone. You know, it can go completely differently any time that you do them. So, you know, each interaction with a baby is an opportunity. You know, they're constantly telling us and showing us new things. And like Inge said, you know, every baby's different, and every time you meet a baby, they've got something different to tell you. So it's not about putting pressure on that moment. It's just yeah, the kind of the bigger picture, I suppose.
Now a question I would have, see, as chair, I can take this opportunity again. This must take a lot of time, Stephanie, doing these MBOs alongside maybe the systematic examination.
Yeah, I think I think that is something that I could understand that people would worry about, but the MBO it's not, you know, it's not that you must, it's not a tick list exercise. It's not that you must go through every single one of the observations. You can be doing them whilst you're doing your systematic examination of the newborn. If you just sort of take your time to notice how the baby is responding to you, as opposed to just kind of doing your top to toe check, tick, 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 kind of really just slowing down. It's not kind of another thing to add to the list. You know, has it had a check today? Has it had its hearing screen? Has it had an MBO? That's not what an MBO is all about. It's about you know, just observing the baby and doing it with the parents, as opposed to, you know, the parents being, you know, distracted doing something else while you do the examination of the newborn. It's about looking at the baby together. So it doesn't really, it doesn't add things into your tasks for the day. Once you've kind of got the skills and the knowledge, you can just weave it into your practice, and it's amazing. And like I said, you know, once you've learned it, you can't go back.
Can't unlearn.
Yeah.
I thought that was a really good point, Stephanie. Because I think it's, and both of you illustrate the kind of skills and the sort of quietness and listening, even about when you're presenting, it becomes over that you're listening and looking at this baby, and that's kind of different in some ways, because I think sometimes we as midwives and practitioners are so busy in this busy world, and this is the work, this is worthy of the investment. And I think Inge really highlighted that for me. It's work with all these little neurons expanding and getting this relationship really going. This 2 months now is stuck in my brain, but it's actually worth the investment of spending that time with the mother and baby. And maybe we can reduce some of the paperwork somewhere along the line to have more time with the parents and the babies. I don't know if you wanted to, and I mean, I know I always say this is the fastest hour in the week, and we're coming to the kind of end. And I'm just wondering if you want to say any final little words that you don't feel that you quite, one more word that you'd like to say before we close. Or something you think you it's really important, or you missed, or
Yeah, I
kind
think
of take home message.
yeah, I think for me, because I wonder if the quote that I read out from Professor Newton about the teachable moment, knowing Professor Newton quite well, I wonder would actually, I anticipate what he means by that is a teachable moment for all of us. And I know as a practitioner, when I work or I do an MBO with a family, I learn so much about their baby. I learn so much from the parents. So they actually teach me an awful lot about relationships and behavior. So it's not a one way, it's not the practitioner teaching the parents. That is not at all what we're talking about when we talk about MBO. And just to remember, this is not a test. It's not an assessment. There's no
That's
part.
lovely. That's perfect. That's perfect. Thank you. Stephanie, did you want to cap that?
Well, I was,
Well,
yeah.
not cap it, but
Yeah, just to say that, if any midwives that are listening or watching, get the opportunity to do the MBO training, yeah, that I would just really, really encourage you to kind of seize the opportunity, because it's really fantastic.
Absolutely. And I have to say, and I should have said right at the outset to our audience, on the resources list, I have put links to the Brazelton Centre, and there's an enormous amount of information there. And actually, this week is the most fantastic week to be there, because there's so much going on, and so many resources that you can have a look at. And actually, if you're interested in doing this program, it really does make a difference. And of course, you can add to your NMC proficiencies, because we need to know more about the baby. We need to be investing our time in caring for the mother and the baby together, remembering that the baby can't tell us when there's a problem. We have to look at the way they're behaving. What Inge was saying right at the beginning about the answers are there in the baby's behaviour, and really important to remember. And I want to say a huge thank you to Inge and Stephanie for joining us this evening. I don't think this will be the last either, because I've learned a lot this evening, and I'm so grateful to you both for coming to share your knowledge and your experience with us so brilliantly. I want to also say a big thank you to Jack. It's not Angela this week, it's Jack this week, who's making sure everything's beautifully recorded. So you can have your podcast at 6 o'clock in the morning on Friday morning, and you can have all the package online next Thursday. I have to kind of remember that. So that'll be accessible. So thank you to Jack. Thank you to Paul for sending questions through to me so well and quickly. Next week we'll be here, same time, same place, and we're looking at research and a couple of research projects, particularly looking at approaches to increase involvement of women from disadvantaged groups, including the Black and brown women, to involve them in real research, to really make a change to some of the outcomes and improve care for those women and babies, because we're still not getting it right, and we need to get it right. So we're joined by Dr. Georgia Clancy, lead researcher on the PROMISE study, and Professor Christine McCourt, lead on the REACH study. Also, just another call for the Manchester Festival, 9th of July. So if you want to book for that, there's still some places available. And in the meantime, a big thank you to our lovely Inge and Stephanie for sharing their knowledge about the Brazelton and communication with these babies and mums and parents. And we'll see you next week. Take care and see you next week.